4 seconds, 2 bullets, 22 lives about to vanish if one finger twitched on a detonator. And here's the insane part. The SEALs didn't trust the woman holding the rifle. They thought she'd choke, they thought she didn't belong, until the impossible happened. But the truth? The Navy almost erased her name forever. In the next few minutes, you'll live inside the shot that defied physics, the silence that carried a whole team, and the twist they never wanted the world to see. This is a simple woman, and if you believe untold courage deserves the spotlight, hit subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear will leave you stunned. 4 seconds, 2 bullets, 22 hostages with their lives dangling from the twitch of a single finger. And the woman behind the scope? She wasn't a SEAL, she wasn't even Navy, she was an outsider they didn't trust, a ghost they called only when the impossible had to be done. Her name was Elena Veyra, call sign Specter, and that night every ounce of doubt about her would either shatter or kill them all. The command center was a windowless tomb of recycled air and fluorescent hum. A satellite feed of the Gulf of Aden burned on the main screen, the cargo vessel MV Erebos, a drifting prison in black water. Red circles marked hostages penned in compartments, grainy images of armed men pacing the decks, and at the bridge a figure clutching a dead man's switch wired to enough explosives to turn steel into falling fire. Lieutenant Commander Jackson Cole, call sign Bravo 1, stood at the front of the room like a blade forged in anger. His team, tough, restless, built on years of sweat and scars, watched him without blinking. Then his eyes cut to the back corner where Elena sat, still as stone in desert camo. "This is our external support," Cole said, each word weighed down with reluctance. "Captain Elena Veyra, Marine Recon, Sniper." He didn't bother to hide the bite in his voice. The SEALs shifted, a few smirked, some looked away. Outsiders didn't belong in their den. She felt their judgment ripple across the room, but her gaze never wavered. "The target is here." Cole's laser pointer burned across the image, circling the terrorist leader on the bridge. His thumb rests on a trigger. If he spooks, if he dies the wrong way, the ship goes up with all 22 civilians. Any assault is suicide unless his hand is neutralized first. Command's proposal, he paused as if tasting poison, is a single shot from 3 kilometers across open water. At night, he let the silence sit like a noose. Then he turned fully to Elena. "Your file says you've done long shots before, desert, static targets. This isn't sand and sun. This is a hand on a ship in shifting wind. Can you guarantee that shot?" Every eye turned on her. She felt the weight, but she did not flinch. Her voice was cool, detached, not the tone of bravado but of physics stated as fact. "I do not guarantee outcomes, Commander. I guarantee the precision of my attempt. You'll have 2 seconds once the bullet lands. That's your window. Waste it, and everyone dies." The room went colder. Cole's jaw flexed, his eyes searching her face for arrogance, for fear. He found only stillness. He hated it more than he admitted. "All right," he said at last, "the mission goes. But if this fails, it won't be my team's blood alone." Hours later, the armory smelled of solvent and oil, sanctuary to some, temple to Elena. She laid out the disassembled pieces of her custom rifle, each component cradled in cut foam. To the untrained, it was metal and weight. To her, it was an instrument tuned by ritual. She worked with the patient precision of a watchmaker, every motion deliberate, erasing the world until only certainties remained. Corporal Nate Rourke, her spotter, approached with a crate of ammunition. Fresh-faced, eyes still too young but steady in his movements. "Your 50 BMG, ma'am?" Without glancing up, she shook her head. "Not this. I need Ralphos MK211 multipurpose. Standard rounds won't hold terminal stability. Check again." He hesitated, frowning. "This is top of the line. Not what I require." Her voice was soft but absolute. He left in a hurry, stung, but when he returned with the correct crate, she tested each round herself, weighing, rolling them across glass to detect imperfection, discarding any that failed her invisible standards. From the doorway, unseen until then, Cole watched. He expected a soldier. What he saw looked closer to an artist. Her devotion wasn't ego, it was submission to the merciless laws of physics. For the first time, a sliver of respect flickered through his doubt, though he'd never confess it. When she finally selected 5 flawless cartridges, she closed the box. A ritual complete. Her eyes lifted briefly, pale blue, cold as the sea. "I'm ready." The port where she and Rourke would set up was a graveyard of cranes and rust. The night was thick with salt and diesel, moon veiled by clouds. They moved like shadows, her steps soundless, his breath steady behind her. At the base of Crane 4, an ancient steel giant leaning into the water, they stopped. The climb would give them line of sight to the Erebos 3 kilometers out. Then from the dark came a growl. A dog, ribs sharp under mangy fur, blocking their path. Nate's hand twitched toward his suppressed sidearm. She caught his wrist with iron calm. No shot, no noise. Her other hand dipped into her pocket, broke a ration bar, tossed it gently aside. The animal hesitated, torn between aggression and hunger. Hunger won. It vanished with the food into the dark. Nate stared at her, chest tight with the breath he hadn't realized he held. She was already moving. He followed, shaken by how easily she bent violence without firing a round. The crane groaned under their weight, metal slick with spray. At the operator's cabin high above the pier, Elena unfolded her rifle with reverence, every click and snap of assembly sounding like a vow. Nate set the spotting scope, weather meter glowing faint. From here the Erebos loomed in the night, a black fortress adrift, its lights dim and sinister. She adjusted her scope, eye pressed to the cup. "Wind?" "From 7 o'clock, Nate murmured. "Variable, 10 to 14 knots. She entered numbers on her wrist display, but already knew the truth. Computers couldn't solve this sea, only rhythm could. In the command center, Cole's voice cracked over comms, taut with urgency. "Specter, priority target is still the detonator. Sniper on deck is irrelevant. Do not engage unless compromised." She said nothing for a moment, only breathing, steady, controlled. Then her whisper bled into the channel. "The sea changes every 20 seconds. I only need 1 second to end them both." Cole clenched his jaw. He hated her certainty, but he also felt deep in his bones that she might be right. The port lay silent under a shroud of cloud, the kind of silence that carried weight, thick and expectant. Elena Veyra crouched in the operator's cabin of Crane 4, her rifle stretched out before her like a relic on an altar. Every motion of her hands carried the unhurried cadence of ritual, adjusting bipod legs to the millimeter, checking the glass for flecks invisible to anyone but her, and aligning the scope so precisely that the horizon itself seemed to bend around her will. Corporal Nate Rourke watched, pretending to keep busy with his spotting scope, but his eyes kept straying to her hands. She didn't move like the snipers he'd trained beside. They had been efficient, almost mechanical. She was something else, measured, reverent, as if the rifle were alive. He opened his mouth once to comment, then shut it. "Better to watch and learn." "Wind steady?" she asked, her voice flat. He checked the Kestrel meter again, holding at 12 knots. Gusts down to 10. "Good. We'll need the lull." Her calm unnerved him. He'd been in firefights, but the quiet before always left his nerves raw. For her, the quiet seemed to be her natural state. Minutes stretched into hours. They tracked the movement on the Erebos, guards pacing lazily, hostages huddled in the bridge's heat signature. Every so often, Elena would murmur an observation, angles, blind spots, how the terrorists favored one side of the ship when smoking. Nate scribbled notes, his admiration building. She saw patterns where he saw chaos. Then the night tested them. From below, a low metallic creak echoed through the crane's frame. Elena's eyes snapped from her scope to the floor. Nate followed her gaze. One of the ladder's corroded bolts had loosened, dropping into the water with a splash that seemed deafening. He froze, panic burning his throat. If the sound had carried through her scope, Elena shifted, scanning the deck of the Erebos. A guard paused mid-step, head tilting, rifle raised slightly. His gaze swept the water. Nate held his breath until his lungs screamed. Elena exhaled slowly, almost a sigh, then whispered, "He's listening, not seeing." She reached down and tapped the crane's steel frame with a fingernail. Once, twice, 3 times. A faint metallic ping carried into the night, blending with the distant clatter of moored ships shifting in their berths. The guard hesitated, frowned, then relaxed. To him it was just the port's nocturnal groan. He stubbed his cigarette and moved on. Nate blinked, stunned. She'd taken a mistake that could have doomed them both and folded it back into the environment, disguising danger as normal noise. He swallowed hard. "You just... quiet." She cut him off. "Never explain to the night. It doesn't care." The words landed like scripture. He leaned back, pulse still racing, but his respect for her solidifying into something heavier. This wasn't luck. She knew how to bend silence itself. As the hour crawled past midnight, a fog rolled in, ghostly tendrils curling off the water. It would complicate visibility, refract heat signatures. Nate muttered a curse under his breath. Elena didn't. She adjusted a dial, changed her focus and murmured, "Fog is not an obstacle. It's a filter. Look through it, not at it." He tried, peering into his scope again, forcing his eyes to see what she meant. Slowly, the shapes aboard the Erebos sharpened, the blur resolving into outlines. It felt impossible, yet she'd seen it instinctively. By then he realized he wasn't just her spotter, he was her student. They sat in silence again, broken only by the distant slap of waves. Nate thought of his instructors back at training, the men who taught him wind, calls, and distance equations. None of them had ever told him to listen to the night, to treat fog as a filter, or to feed a starving dog instead of pulling a trigger. Elena Veyra was rewriting his idea of soldiering in real time. At last she leaned back from the scope, eyes pale in the dim light. "The ship is a chessboard. The detonator is the king, but remember, the king is nothing without the sniper covering him. You're saying we can't win without taking him out first." Her gaze flicked to him, sharp, assessing. "I'm saying we can't even move until we do." The words sent a chill crawling down his spine. He thought of the SEALs gearing up, trusting their commander, believing brute force and timing would be enough. He wondered if Cole understood what she saw from here. Elena turned back to her rifle, her face unreadable. Nate didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been branded into him. The mission was still hours from climax, but for Nate Rourke, the shift had already happened. He no longer saw her as the outsider they'd dismissed. He saw her as the hinge on which the night would turn. The fog thickened into shifting curtains, folding the Erebos into a blurred ghost on the horizon. Elena's eye never left the scope. Hours of stillness had honed her breathing to a whisper, her pulse a metronome. She swept the ship's aft deck again, crosshairs gliding along the stacked containers. At first it was nothing, just the stutter of heat signatures, lazy guards, shadows dancing in distortion. Then it appeared, a flicker, too precise, too disciplined, a brief bloom of heat where nobody should be, vanishing instantly. Her spine stiffened. She whispered, "Nate." Grid 4 Alpha, aft deck, between the blue stacks. He swiveled his scope, scanning hard. Nothing, just shadows. Wait, they held their breath together. 2 minutes dragged like iron. Then it came again, this time at a different angle, a tiny flare like a heartbeat caught in glass. Nate sucked in air. "That's a lens." "Sniper," Elena said, voice flat as stone. The silence in the crane cabin turned heavy, charged. This wasn't a conscript waving a rifle. This was a professional, patient, skilled, waiting for the smallest mistake to bleed them dry. She felt a strange, quiet respect coil in her chest. They were two predators staring across a battlefield of water, speaking the silent language of aim and concealment. Her finger hovered over the transmit switch. She clicked it. Bravo 1, this is Specter. Be advised, enemy sniper identified, aft deck. He's disciplined, scanning for overwatch. He has overlapping fields of fire. Your route is compromised. Static hissed back. Then Cole's voice cut through, taut and unyielding. Copy. Priority remains the detonator. Do not engage the sniper unless directly compromised. That's an order. Elena's jaw tightened. Negative, Bravo 1. If you move as planned, he'll cut you down before your second man leaves cover. He's built a funnel. You won't see it from your angle, but I can. The comms went quiet for a heartbeat. Nate could almost hear the grinding of Cole's teeth through the silence. Then Cole snapped, we don't have time for side engagements. You fire, the ship wakes up, we lose the window. Nate's eyes darted between Elena and the radio unit. He'd never heard anyone speak back to Cole like that. But Elena didn't blink. Her voice hardened, clipped. If you ignore him, you lose your team. That's not theory, that's geometry. Cole's response was a rasp, thick with frustration. Specter, you are here as support. I give the orders. Hold position. Keep your scope on the primary. That's final. The channel cut to static. The crane cabin settled into silence again, but this time it wasn't calm. It was brittle. Nate's pulse thundered in his ears. He stared at Elena. What do we do? She leaned into the scope again, eyes pale and unshaken. We watch, we wait, and when he reveals himself, we end him. Nate hesitated. But Cole... Her gaze flicked to him, sharp as glass. Cole isn't looking at the whole board. You are my spotter. You trust me, or you walk. The words landed heavy. For a moment he thought about Cole, the man who'd led missions, who carried authority in his voice like a weapon. But then he remembered the ration bar tossed to the starving dog, the fingertip taps that disguised a fatal sound, the way she bent silence to her will. Cole commanded men. Elena commanded the night itself. He nodded slowly. I trust you. Something shifted in her expression, not relief, not warmth, but the faintest acknowledgement. A pact sealed without ceremony. Through her scope the sniper flickered again, patient scanning. She imagined him on the other end, lying prone, breath measured, finger resting on a cold trigger. He was waiting for her to reveal herself. She almost smiled. She whispered, more to herself than to Nate. This isn't just physics anymore, it's a duel. And somewhere across 3 kilometers of dark water, she knew the man called Ghost Hand was whispering the same thing. The night pressed in tighter, heavy with fog and the weight of waiting. Hours had stretched into a punishing rhythm. Check wind, adjust scope, scan, breathe. Nate's eyes burned from the strain of staring through his optics. Yet Elena remained unnervingly still, her breathing steady, her trigger finger curled loosely along the guard, patient as the sea itself. Then it happened. A faint hum, electronic, unnatural, threaded through the comms headset. Elena froze. Her instincts screamed. She dialed her scope wider. Across the water, just above the aft deck containers, a sharp pulse of light shimmered for an instant, invisible to the naked eye, but stark through her optics. Infrared. Ghost Hand was searching, her lips barely moved. Nate, kill your laser. He glanced at the small weather unit, realizing with a surge of panic that the calibration tool's IR emitter was still running. He fumbled, hands clumsy in the dark. For a terrifying second, the beam cut through the fog like a whisper of betrayal. Through her scope, Elena watched Ghost Hand's rifle snap toward the shoreline. Her body tensed. Any second he would lock on. The predator across the water had scented blood. Now, Nate, she hissed. He slammed the switch, the IR winked out, but the damage was done. Ghost Hand's crosshairs lingered in their direction, hunting. The silence stretched razor thin. Nate's chest heaved, sweat prickling under his collar. He knows, he whispered, dread thick in his throat. Elena didn't answer. Her eye remained welded to the scope, tracking the subtle sway of the sniper's barrel. Then, with a breath so slow it seemed carved from stone, she reached up and tapped the side of her scope. Click, click. She shifted her aim deliberately several meters off target, letting the faintest glimmer of her own lens catch the ambient light. It was bait. Seconds later, a shot cracked from the Erebos, sharp, brutal, echoing across the Gulf. Metal screamed as the round punched through a steel container 2 meters from where her decoy glint had shimmered. Nate flinched, heart slamming into his throat. Elena didn't move. She whispered, "Patience. He thinks he missed." Her gamble worked. Ghost Hand's barrel paused, then swept back, scanning elsewhere, convinced his target had shifted. He'd taken the shot, and in doing so, revealed his timing, his rhythm. Nate exhaled in a ragged rush, his hands trembling as he lowered his scope. Jesus Christ, we were 1 second from being ghosts. Elena finally pulled back from her rifle, eyes pale and unreadable in the dim cabin. We are always 1 second from being ghosts. The trick is deciding who carries the memory of it. Her words chilled him deeper than the night air. Yet beneath the fear, respect burned hotter than ever. She hadn't just saved them. She'd manipulated the duel itself, turned near death into intel. He swallowed hard. You baited him. On purpose. She gave the faintest nod. Now I know his cadence, his recoil recovery, the way he commits too soon. Next time he won't get the chance. Nate stared at her, seeing not the outside of the SEALs had doubted, but a mind playing 3 moves ahead in a game no one else even recognized. For the first time, he felt the pull of absolute trust. Their comms crackled to life. Cole's voice clipped, irritated. "Specter, report status. You're quiet." Elena keyed her mic, her tone flat, still watching the board. No change on the primary. It was a lie, clean and practiced. Cole would never know how close they'd come to being vaporized. He didn't deserve to. She clicked off and turned back to Nate. "You saw it. If he fires again, you'll call his correction. Understand?" Nate nodded, pulse still hammering, but his voice steadied. "I've got you." For the first time all night, a flicker of something almost human softened Elena's features. It wasn't a smile, closer to an acknowledgement, a silent bond sealed in shared peril. Outside, the fog rolled heavier, swallowing the Erebos into a phantom shape. Inside the cabin, 2 figures sat shoulder to shoulder, bound not by orders or ranks, but by the thin, fragile thread of trust woven through a moment of near death. And though Nate would never say it aloud, he knew then, whatever came next, he'd follow her into the dark without hesitation. The night was a clenched fist. Hours of silence had boiled down to this single fragile moment, every variable poised to shatter into chaos. On the bridge of the Erebos, the terrorist leader shoved hostages to the floor, his right hand raised high, the detonator gleaming in the pale wash of deck lights. His thumb trembled above the switch. Through her scope, Elena saw everything. The faces of the terrified civilians, the sweat slicking the man's grip, the faint quiver in his wrist. She also saw the glint of Ghost Hand's barrel sliding into position atop the containers, his crosshairs hunting for her SEAL team below. 2 threats, 2 worlds apart, and only one chance to stop them both. Her finger tightened near the trigger, but she didn't fire, not yet. Timing was the currency of survival, and she had only 1 coin to spend. "Bravo 1, she whispered into comms, her voice low and sharp as a blade. "If you cross now, you walk into a kill zone. Sniper owns your path." Cole's reply came back strained, almost desperate. "We don't have time, Specter. The detonator goes any second." Her pulse slowed, her voice colder still. "Then I take them both," static hissed. The line fell silent, then at last, Cole's voice returned, stripped of command, raw with a trust he hated to admit. "It's all on you." The words landed on her shoulders heavier than the rifle. 29 lives, the SEAL team and the hostages, balanced on the thin arc of 2 bullets. Nate's voice cut through, urgent, wind holding 12 knots, mirage unstable. "You don't have a clean window, quiet." Elena's tone was iron. "I'll make one." She pressed deeper into the scope, body molded to steel. The fog shimmered, bending heat signatures, breaking the world into 1,000 distorted fragments. She let it wash over her, remembered the lesson burned into her years ago: don't fight the mirage. Feel the rhythm. Shoot between its heartbeats. And then she saw it, a lull, a fraction of calm in the chaos of shifting air, a heartbeat where the ocean's rhythm aligned, her moment. Stand by, she breathed. Her thumb tapped a stud on the rifle's foregrip. An invisible IR dot flickered onto the terrorist's hand. She burned the sightline into her memory, the dot relative to the watchband, the cuff, the knuckle. She killed the laser instantly. Ghost Hand would have seen it. He was already shifting, no more hesitation. Her lungs emptied, her heartbeat dropped into the void between beats. She pressed the trigger, the rifle erupted. The first shot tore into the night, a thunderclap that cracked Elena's bones with its recoil. The round screamed across 3 kilometers of open water, a 180-grain messenger of physics set on an unbending path. But she wasn't done. Before the casing even clattered on steel, her hand yanked the bolt, ejecting brass with brutal efficiency. The recoil became motion. Her crosshairs swung a fraction of an inch, a shift so precise it was invisible to anyone else. Ghost Hand's position filled her scope. The second round fired, an echo of the first. 2 gunshots separated by less than 4 seconds, yet each carrying the weight of worlds. For a breathless instant, silence returned. Then chaos answered. On the Erebos bridge, the terrorist leader stared dumbly at his hand. For half a second it looked intact. He even twitched his thumb, then his world erupted. The .50 caliber round had obliterated flesh and bone, shredding his grip into a red mist. He screamed, collapsing, the detonator tumbling useless from what remained of his palm. At the same instant, Ghost Hand jerked in his nest. The second round punched straight through the scope of his rifle, shattering glass into his eye, driving shards deep into his skull. He died instantly, never even pulling the trigger. Nate's breath exploded from him, disbelief tangled with awe. Oh my God, she did it. On comms, the seals erupted in motion. Cole's voice, ragged but alive, primary neutralized. Sniper down, move, move, move. Elena didn't answer. She simply watched, silent, as the SEAL team surged from shadows, their boots pounding across steel, their silhouettes flowing like a storm through the superstructure. But then came the near failure. One of the hostages, panicked, desperate, scrambled up, shrieking. In the chaos, another terrorist raised his rifle, aiming to spray bullets into the crowd. Elena's scope snapped to him. Her chamber was empty. Time froze. Nate cursed, fumbling to bring his own rifle up, too slow. Then the terrorist's weapon jammed, a single blessed click. He slammed the magazine, furious, but by then Cole's team had reached him. A suppressed shot ended the threat. Nate slumped, shaking. That was almost it. That was everything. Elena said nothing. She simply reloaded with unhurried precision, her calm terrifying in its absoluteness. Almost doesn't count, she murmured. Below, the SEALs tore through compartments with brutal efficiency. Suppressed fire thumped in the night, doors breached, hostages freed. Within minutes, the ship was theirs. But the legend had already been written. 2 bullets, 4 seconds, a detonator dropped from ruined fingers, a rival sniper silenced by a shot through the eye of his own scope. And a woman they never trusted, proving in the space between heartbeats that the impossible was only ever physics obeyed by someone who refused to miss. Dawn bled pale light across the horizon, but inside the briefing chamber, it might as well have been midnight. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead, washing the room in sterile glow. The air was thick with exhaustion, and the faint metallic tang of coffee left too long on burners. Bravo team sat in crisp uniforms now, their faces clean-shaven, their eyes rimmed with fatigue but burning with the afterglow of survival. Elena sat at the back of the room, as silent as ever, her presence an afterthought to the navy brass who crowded the table's head. She didn't mind. Shadows had always been her element. At the front, a rear admiral with silver hair and polished shoes clicked a remote. Helmet cam footage flared across the screen, the rush of boots on steel, a door kicked open, hostages weeping with relief, gunfire muffled by suppressors. The Admiral's voice flowed smoothly, practiced, crafted for the ears of politicians. A textbook operation, he declared. Swift, decisive, minimal collateral. Lieutenant Commander Cole, your team's discipline under impossible pressure was exemplary. Cole sat stiff, jaw tight. The words hung heavy. The Admiral continued, shaping the narrative like clay. This will stand as a flawless demonstration of naval special warfare capability. The success was due to bold leadership and the execution of our operators. Not a single mention of Elena. Nate, seated 2 chairs down from Cole, glanced back at her. She didn't move. She didn't frown. She simply watched, her pale eyes unreadable. But Nate's stomach twisted. He knew the truth. Without her, he and the others would be corpses bobbing in the Gulf. The Admiral gestured toward the screen again, as if signing off on a final report. This is the record we'll carry forward. Clean, simple, effective. Cole's knuckles whitened against the table. He could have stayed silent, let the narrative pass unchallenged. That was the easier path, the one paved smooth by rank and tradition. He could have taken the praise, let his men bask in it, moved on. But the memory of 4 seconds stretched endlessly across 3 kilometers burned in his skull. He remembered the detonator slipping from ruined fingers, the sniper's rifle shattering, and the voice that had delivered them all through the storm. Before he realized he was speaking, the words slipped out. No. The room stilled. The Admiral's brow furrowed. "Excuse me, Commander?" Cole pushed back his chair and stood. The air shifted. Every seal in the room straightened. "With all due respect, sir," Cole said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of steel, "the record isn't clean, and it sure as hell isn't simple. That mission was impossible, until one person made it possible." The Admiral's smile faltered. "Commander, we've already—" Cole cut across him, a breach of etiquette so sharp it snapped every head around the table. "She took 2 shots, sir. 2 shots 3 kilometers across open water in 4 seconds. One blew the detonator hand off the primary. The other killed a professional sniper who had us locked in a funnel. Without her, my men would be dead, and the Erebus would be a burning crater." Silence. The Admiral's lips pressed thin. He darted a glance toward the back of the room, where Elena sat still as a statue. "Support elements aren't the focus of these reports," he said carefully. "We highlight the operational unit. That's standard." Cole leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "Standard didn't save us. She did." The weight of his words reverberated in the room. Nate's chest swelled with pride, his respect for Cole cementing alongside the bond he felt for Elena. Around the table, the SEAL's eyes shifted, not with surprise but with a unanimous agreement written in silence. For the first time, Elena allowed her gaze to meet Cole's. Across the sterile chamber, their eyes locked. His expression carried no bravado, only the raw honesty of a man who had staked his life on her, calm in the storm. Her face remained neutral, but inside something rare flickered. A recognition that the truth for once had not been buried. The Admiral cleared his throat, clearly unsettled. He shuffled his papers, murmured something about reviewing details, and abruptly adjourned the session. But the damage to his polished narrative had already been done. As the room emptied, the SEALs filed past Elena. Each man gave a small nod, subtle but deliberate, a salute without formality, a recognition that didn't need words. Nate lingered, his voice low as he passed her chair. "They can't erase it. Not after tonight." She didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, letting the exhaustion seep through her bones. The fight was over, but the weight of silence, her oldest companion, remained. Still, for the first time, she didn't feel quite so alone in it. The sea was quiet again, not the fragile silence of the mission, but the honest hush of dawn. Waves whispered against the shore, carrying the salt of survival. Elena sat alone on the sand, her rifle case open beside her, each component laid out on a cloth. She moved through her ritual of cleaning with the same patience as always, though her hands carried a fatigue deeper than bone. The horizon was a bruise of purple and gold. She paused, lifted her eyes and let the growing light wash over her face. For the first time in 24 hours, she allowed herself to breathe without calculation. Bootsteps crunched on gravel. She didn't need to look, she knew the rhythm. Jackson Cole approached, a ceramic mug in each hand, steam curling like threads into the cool morning air. He stopped a few feet away, held one out. She accepted without a word, wiped her hands on a cloth, and cradled the warmth. They sat side by side, the gulf stretching endless before them. For several minutes neither spoke. Words would have felt like graffiti on something sacred. Finally Cole broke the silence. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "I told you I owed you a sunrise." Elena's lips twitched, almost a smile, though it faded before it fully formed. She turned her gaze back to the horizon. The sun broke free from the water, a molten sliver, flooding the sky with fire. For a moment, it seemed the whole world held its breath. "This," she murmured, "is enough." Cole studied her profile in the light. The woman he'd doubted, the outsider he'd dismissed, had carried them all across the abyss. He shook his head slightly. "I've led men through hell. I thought I understood trust. But you carried us with silence. That's not in any manual." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. A gull wheeled overhead, its cry sharp and lonely. The waves rolled in steady rhythm, as if echoing her breathing. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight lift, if only for a heartbeat. Behind them, footsteps again. Nate Rourke approached carefully, a folded folder clutched in his hand. He hesitated before intruding, then cleared his throat. "Sir, Captain Veyra." Cole glanced up. "At ease, Corporal. What is it?" Nate's face was tight, uncertain. He extended the folder to Elena. "I thought you should see this." It was attached to the after-action reports, buried deep. Elena frowned, set her mug down, and flipped the folder open. Inside were grainy satellite stills, timestamps from the night before. One image showed the Erebos deck. Another showed thermal traces farther out, too far for a deck camera, too precise to be noise. Her jaw tightened. Cole leaned over. "What am I looking at?" Nate swallowed. Intel analysts flagged a second heat bloom. Offshore, East Quadrant. It wasn't ghost hand. For a long moment only the sea spoke. Elena's fingers lingered on the photograph, tracing the faint blur of heat signature. A phantom on the water. She closed the folder slowly. Her face gave nothing away, but her voice carried the gravity of stone. If there was one sniper, there could always be another. Cole's jaw clenched. He hated loose ends. He hated shadows in reports. But more than that, he hated the look in her eyes. A gaze that said her war wasn't done. Not by miles. The sun climbed higher, flooding them in light. To anyone else it was a perfect morning. For them, it was both an ending and a beginning. Cole finally spoke, his voice firm, almost a vow. "Then we prepare. Next time, I won't doubt you." Elena lifted her mug again, sipping slowly. Her eyes never left the horizon where gold fire kissed the waves. She gave no promise, no reassurance, only silence, the same silence that had saved them all. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of morning light, another rifle might already have been waiting. The sun had fully broken the horizon now, scattering the last shadows across the sea. To anyone else it was simply another morning, the hum of waves, the cries of gulls, the ordinary churn of life moving forward. But for those who knew what had unfolded in the silent hours before dawn, this sunrise carried weight. It was the quiet proof that 29 lives had not been lost, that one impossible gamble had held, and that the difference between catastrophe and survival had been measured in 2 bullets fired by a woman no one had believed in. Elena Veyra never asked for recognition. She would carry the memory of that night as she always had, inside, wordless, like the slow rhythm of her breath. For her, the ritual of silence was the only reward she ever trusted. And yet, as she sat on that beach, mug warm in her hands, she allowed herself one rare truth. Someone had finally spoken for her. Cole had broken the silence. Nate had brought her the truth, and for a fleeting moment she was not invisible. But the story does not end neatly. The folder Nate had handed her, the blurred signature of another sniper watching from the dark, was a reminder that even victories are incomplete. There are always more shadows, always another predator across the water, always the possibility that the silence will be tested again. That is why this story matters. It isn't just about a perfect shot. It's about trust forged where there was none. About an outsider proving that silence can be sharper than any blade, stronger than any command. And about the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the official record tries to erase. When you think of the mission on the Erebos, remember this. The men stormed the ship, the hostages were freed, but it was a woman in the dark who set the board, who made the impossible possible. Without her, the sunrise would have been smoke and ruin. And now, this is where I turn to you. If these stories speak to you, if you believe courage like this deserves to be remembered and told, then don't let it vanish into silence. Subscribe to A Simple Woman, share these stories, and help keep alive the truths that never make it into history books. Because sometimes the difference between forgetting and remembering is simply whether someone chooses to listen.